Hey guys, welcome back to the 100% Wild podcast. I'm Mark Kenyon here with Wired to Hunt, and with me is Matt Drury from Drury Outdoors. How are you?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's the end of the season here in Michigan, so now I'm just getting excited for shed hunting, basically. So,
Have you been seeing many
have you guys?
shed bucks yet in Michigan?
That's what I was just gonna ask you. I have not seen anything here in Michigan, but I'm obsessively watching it because I'm really hoping to find Holyfield's sheds this year. So I'm gonna have more cameras out than ever. Probably more cameras out than I had during the season almost. Now just hoping to keep track of when this deer loses his antlers so that I can call all my friends and try to just scour everything and find them. So my fingers are crossed.
We saw a shed buck last night hunting, actually. So it's they're starting, and I know Terry and Mark have as well. So it's starting.
Yeah. So speaking of Terry, right? Your dad Terry was with us again today.
Absolutely. We got the old man for one more question.
Yeah. So how many shed bucks have you seen, Terry?
We've only seen the one, but got another one that looked like it shed one side. But we saw one buck that had shed both sides pretty clean already, and that was about a week and a half ago. So they are starting, but it's not unusual to see some of the mature deer this time of year where their testosterone level drops so low and they start dropping antlers. It's not uncommon this time of year.
When are you seeing most of the antlers dropping in your area most years?
Typically by the 10th to the 15th of March, they're all off for the most part. I'm going to say 95% of them are off by the 15th of March. But it's just very random. I think it depends on that testosterone level, and a lot of times you'll see a 2-year-old or 3-year-old that may carry them a little longer because so many of those older bucks now have dropped their antlers and the testosterone level is low across the board. So the ones that still do have that need to chase, you see them carry theirs a little bit longer. And I think it's just random depending on, maybe even it may all go all the way back to when they were born, so how old they are. So I think it's just random depending on the personality of the deer.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like I've seen something similar, and around us, on average, it seems like most of the antlers are starting to drop in like mid-February through mid-March, like that month time frame. It seems like around us is that sweet spot. But to your point, it can happen at any time. And it also seems that I think I've heard you guys mention this too, that if there's a buck that has had some kind of issue, a little injury or malnourished or anything like that, those seem to be the bucks that are shedding the earliest. Is that what you guys have seen too?
Yeah.
Yes. Typically the ones that are injured, you'll see them drop pretty quick and fairly early. And one of the things I'd like to add here is I think guys sometimes it's kind of like holding the bit back, or holding the reins back on a race horse. They want to get out there and they want to find all those sheds before somebody else gets in there and finds them. But a lot of times you can do more harm than good, and have an adverse effect if you go in there a little bit too early. They're all still packing their antlers and you push them out of your parcel, particularly if it's a small tract of ground. The last thing you want to do is run them out. So you got to kind of be careful. It's a fine line, a tightrope that you walk. If you do go in there looking for a few sheds, you might want to be selective about what time of the day you go, what wind you go in on, and tip in there and tip back out of there, or glass from a distance, see if you can see one laying in an open field or something. But last thing you want to do is go in there and push them all out of there.
That's a great point.
Some guys put out like contraptions where they can try to capture, the shed as it comes off, like a fence or whatever near some corn or something, or analogics or whatever they put out. Have you tried that before, Dad?
I did. We actually used some of those utilization cages that we had for our bean fields. And we just configured it a little bit differently. And I picked up a few that way, but I didn't grab too many big ones like that. And guys that are in states where you can feed, like Kansas and Texas and Ohio. There's a lot of states where you can go ahead and put feed on the ground. And I think the deer are accustomed to coming to those. Sometimes those states you may be a little more productive with those antler catchers. But I didn't have very good luck with them, to be honest with you.
Needle in a haystack.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the truth. Well, other than shed hunting, I know something that a lot of people are going to be thinking about this time of year is starting to scout, for the next year. And that's actually what our question of the day today is about. So, Matt, what do you think about getting right to that one?
Let's do it. The question of the day is brought to you by Cabela's, the world's foremost outfitter.
Hey fellas, this is Chris in Buena Vista, Georgia. I have a piece of property I have the opportunity to hunt next deer season. I'm going to go up at the end of this season and actually do some scouting. I'll have 1 or 2 days. My question is, if y'all have a piece of property, this one's only 90 acres, that you've never set foot on, and all you've been able to do is see from Google Earth and Google Maps, what would your approach be on scouting? What would be the most important things for me to focus in on to put myself in a good situation to get a kill come next season? Thank you guys for your help.
So what do you
Great
think
question,
about that one, Terry?
by the way, Chris. That exact scenario we did last year, and we had a parcel of property. It was just a little bit bigger than that. It was, but not much. And we went in this time of year, and I was really looking at rub lines, if you can believe that. And there were a lot of trails, but this time of year, the trails are a little bit different than they are early season and even during the rut because of the lack of cover. So the trails are substantially noticeable this time of year, but they may or may not be the trails you want to be hung on come early season. So we did that last year, and we went in and did a lot of trimming and a lot of hanging. But I look at structure and always have. If you've got a saddle and a ridge, or you've got maybe even a ravine or something that you can get in and out of a set, and you got to kind of think forward and say, what's this going to be like come September and October when I'm planning on hunting here, or maybe even late October and first part of November, because it's so substantially different right now with the woods being open, all the leaves are off, so cover is a big, big issue. But looking at those trails and studying the sign, those rubs, regardless what time of the year they were made, there's very little rubbing going on right now. So for the most part, those rubs were created, in the end of September, middle of October, end of October. All those rubs that you're seeing kind of give you the roadmap that you're looking for, and particularly big rubs, that big sign that you're after. So I look at rubs and I look at structure, and then we try and determine how we're going to get in there and what type of access we're going to have during the end of October or first part of November. Typically, I like to hang those stands high on the ridges for a morning hunt when we know those thermals are going to be carrying your scent upwards, and I like to hunt low for an evening hunt. So, when the thermals are going to be dropping and pushing down, maybe a counterclockwise rotation with a falling barometer, I definitely want to be down low. And then you got to look at access. How are you going to get in there and not blow out everything that you're hunting? Whether it's 90 acres, 9 acres, or 900 acres, you still got to think about access and not running the deer out that you're planning on hunting. So we look at all that. Access is a really, really big deal, and I think it's about half the battle, to be quite honest with you. So last year we did the exact same scenario that Chris was talking about, went in, did a bunch of scouting. I don't mind walking a parcel of property in February and March when some of them have already dropped their antlers, or a lot of them are off, and you can go in there and really study those trails, study the rubs, and even big scrapes. If you got a community scrape or a hub scrape that's still prevalent, pretty good chance that scrape's going to be hot early season or the end of October next year.
Yeah, I think this is a great time of year to be focusing on this type of thing too, because assuming like you said, assuming the snow has melted already, you're going to be able to still see that sign from the rut. But at the same time, you don't need to worry about spooking deer. If a lot of people, I think, find a new property and they go and try to scout it in late summer or just before the hunting season, and then of course that's going to have a negative impact on your hunting that year. But if you're out there in late winter, early spring doing this kind of stuff, you can see the area much better than you would at any other time of year, because you can see that sign, the new greenery hasn't come up yet, and you don't need to worry about potentially putting that pressure on. And then of course, if you happen to wait till after shed season, you got the added bonus of maybe finding some bone too. So I know that I'm going to be out there a lot in the next couple months. But I'm curious, Terry, you talked about structure and how you're focusing on that type of stuff. But when you're doing your late winter scouting, do you pay attention at all to food or water, or try to guess what the food might have been during the hunting season, even though that might be different now?
Absolutely. We're gonna take a view from 10,000 feet and look at what's around us. as much as, what's immediately there in your area. But I think the big picture is almost as important, if not more important, when it comes to hunting mature whitetails. And one of the things I wanted to add that we did last year on that parcel of property, because it was new, we got extremely aggressive and assertive when it came to trimming. I mean, we were cutting a lot of trees, had, saws and the whole bit in there, because the last thing I wanted to do was go in there in July and August and do some real aggressive trimming. So we did it in February. We hung our stands in February, got everything, the safety lines, got the whole thing in there ready to hunt, ready to climb up and sit down. So we did it in February and March in lieu of doing it in July and August. Lack of mosquitoes, lack of ticks, lack of snakes, all those good things make it really, really easy to hang and hunt, or to hang it this time of year so that you can hunt it next fall. But in answer to your question, I think, structure and looking at food source, all of those elements enter into it. It's one big chess match, and trying to figure out that entire game by looking at the whole board makes a big difference. And if you've got corn one year, it's going to be rotated into beans the following year. They may be on those beans early on, but it's not cover. Corn is a little bit different. Not only is it a food source, but it's also cover. So until that corn is cut or until it's picked, then all of a sudden they eliminate half of their bedroom. Beans isn't like that. When they defoliate and the leaves fall off and the beans are still there, obviously there's a food source there, but it's not cover like corn is. So you got to think about that as well, and those food sources, usually get rotated each and every year.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kind of while you're saying that, my mind jumped to something a little bit tangential, and it comes down to efficiency of scouting at this time of year, or really at any time of year. He mentioned he only has a day or two, and he might not have the whole day. I've had some situations like this where I've picked up permission on a new property. This actually happened last summer when I got permission on a new spot in Iowa, and I had one day to go and knock on doors. So I knocked on 14 doors during one day and finally got permission on one. And then the next day I had the first half of that to actually try to scout that property before I had to drive back home to Michigan. And so the way I was able to pull that off, and kind of how I'd recommend or suggest people trying something like this if they're limited on time, maybe it's out of state or something, is spend a lot of your scouting time before you actually get out there, and spend that time on Google Earth or on your maps and figure out, based on the aerial view, where you think some of these things might be. So just like you said, Terry, look for structure like ridges or saddles, or all these different types of things. Find those things on the map. Find where you think the food's going to be. Find where you think the funnels are going to be, and either print out a map or mark it up on your phone or something, and then prioritize those spots when you actually go in the next day or whatever it is on foot. I think if you have the time, it's great to walk an entire property, every single bit of it, but most of us might not have that kind of time. So if you can focus in on the key spots and have a hypothesis, I think this is going to be X, and then go confirm that. And I think you can really knock off the most important pieces of the puzzle right off the bat if you kind of plan it like that. Go check those key hot spots that you think will be like that, and then determine whether or not you were right. That's a great way to knock out some good scouting on a short amount of time, I think.
You really almost described to a T what we did last year. We took that aerial photo and we had it laminated, and then ended up, marking all of our stand locations, what wind direction, how we'd access it. So you've pretty much described a recipe for a guy to go in and take a new parcel of property, particularly this time of year. I think you can be more effective right now than you can in June and July and August anyway, because you see so much more. When the woods are open like they are right now, you can see an awful lot when it comes to structure. And, old scrapes never go away. They really don't. A few leaves may blow in them, but for the most part, those ones that are down to bare dirt, they're going to be there even when they're snow covered. And you can usually see the indentation. So scrapes are really, really advantageous as far as understanding when a buck might be going to that at the end of October or middle October. And then also looking at that rub line, how he's getting to and from a food source. Because a lot of times, if it's in beans, those rubs may be extremely early. If it's in corn, some of that rub line may be a little bit later. So you got to understand what crop was in at that period of time. And not everybody has tillable fields or crop grounds surrounding their hunting area. So you have to understand, if you're hunting a pasture area or maybe alfalfa fields, when it's most palatable and what time of year those rubs were deposited and made. So all of it enters into it. It's a big chess match. It's understanding and looking at it from a big picture, not necessarily from a micro, but really from a macro kind of mentality.
How often does it happen when you've done the scouting this time of year, January, February, March, whatever, you hang your stands and you looked at the aerials, well then you get in and start hunting it the next fall and you actually have visual evidence of what's happening and you're not on them quite like you thought you would be and you have to readjust. Does that happen often to you? Or, I mean, it probably happens, on every piece of property, I would assume.
That's never happened.
Yeah, right.
It happens almost every event,
yeah.
And you're always tweaking. You're always trying to figure them out. Again, the chess match continues. And once in a while you get right, but, and you hit the home run. But more often than not, because they don't read the script, and we've said that for years, they're on their own time and their own direction. So often we'll change and tweak those sets, or we may trim or do additional trimming, or find out, we're hunting it on the wrong wind. And that's something that we talk about internally, but we haven't talked about it externally. When you set a stand this time of year and there's no foliage on, you're going to get a pretty true wind. When you set a stand in the early season and all the foliage is on, you never get a true wind. It's almost impossible depending on whether you're hunting high or hunting low on that particular area. And guys, you go to a spot and you think, okay, I'm going to hunt this on a north, and it turns out to be a north is a south and a south is a north. A lot of times it's because of the foliage. It'll come whipping down that foliage, and then all of a sudden you got a backdraft and you're trying to figure out why. So there's a lot of things that can change once you get in there. And we've had that happen more often than not.
On that Illinois piece you keep referencing, I know you had a couple that you leased over there. The one where I killed this fall, or actually in December there, you and Michael went in there and hung that set and trimmed it, a couple days before I came in there? What was it, a day or two?
I think it was like 2 days before you came in, Matt.
So what was it on that specific piece? Because we hadn't been hunting there really. You guys maybe had hunted it once or twice. So what told you guys in that instance, okay, we had these stands set in these other spots, but this is where we need to be?
Well, Michael's just really smart, for one thing. So we went in there, we were looking at tracks, believe it or not. And if you got big tracks on a field, big buck tracks, and we had a volunteer food source. And, here's something that I don't know that's ever happened to us. We had an extremely wet end of summer and fall and extremely warm temperatures where a lot of volunteer stuff came up this year that's never, ever happened before. And a lot of stuff that we planted rotted, and that's never happened before. So it was a little different this year. But to answer your question, we went in there, we were looking at big tracks. I didn't even have a Reconyx camera set up over there. We didn't have pictures. We did in a general location, but we didn't right there where we picked the set to hang. And hanging a set for firearms is always a little easier than it is hanging a set for archery tackle. And we were hanging it for a firearms. We knew the location. We knew there were some big deer in that area, and we were really going on tracks and where they were feeding out into that field. And that volunteer food source was coming up in that cut corn. It was a greenery that they were on because of the warm temperatures. So we literally went in there 2 days before you came in, hung it, and it was only about 8 foot off the ground. It was low, but it was set up for firearms, and you whacked a nice deer with a tradition muzzleloader. So it worked out pretty good.
Yeah, it was kind of in like a finger of the timber, so the way the cut corn kind of wrapped around it, and it was in the finger there. I mean, did that kind of have anything to play into your decision into hanging that finger as opposed to the other side of the other side of the timber? Or there was a lot of options there, but that one finger, was it just based on the tracks, I guess?
That and wind. We were really looking at wind direction, when you could hunt it on the right wind, and we knew kind of because of the 10-day forecast, we knew what winds we were going to have and how you could access that. So we were all the way out in the tip of that finger, and we were expecting that movement to come out and feed forward. And we talk about it all the time, feeding them forward. And it was going out into a more open area. So, some of that happens at night where they won't go out into those open areas until the latter part of the evening, and we were trying to catch them coming out of the timber there. So, but we were all the way out in the tip of that finger. And it was as much about access and wind direction, getting in there without doing any damage.
Hey, thanks, by the way.
Oh, no problem. By the way, I didn't kill one over there with a firearm, just so you know.
I know. You killed one with a bow, though. And he was a real nice deer.
I did kill one with a bow. Matter of fact, 2 states, Missouri and Illinois, to give everybody that's listening an idea. They think every time we climb up, we kill one. I went 2 states this year and didn't kill a deer in either state with a firearms. Illinois and Missouri, I didn't kill a deer in either one of them.
I was telling Aaron Bennett last night as we were sitting in the stand, I never had a deer while I was actually bow hunting come within bow range. I had one during the Missouri firearm season, but I just not a mature buck, I should say. So it's just sometimes you can't do anything right, sometimes you can't do anything wrong. But with a bow, I never saw anything mature walk in front of us. So what are you gonna do in that situation? It wasn't for lack of hunting either.
How is it that every time Mark and Taylor climb up, they do everything right?
You always say it's not always about you, it's about your spot. There, it's kind of a perfect combination. It's about Mark and his spot. He's made his spot unbelievable. He's the master, man.
Oh, my goodness.
They don't call him a mad scientist for nothing.
They don't. It's amazing.
No.
Everything that they kill, they work their butts off for. I mean, they do put in, he and Wade specifically put in, like you and Michael and many other people out there, but they put in the time. It's not by happenstance. It's a calculated, everything they do is very, very calculated.
I don't know that he gets the credit that he deserves, and I'll give him kudos here because he is such a tactician and such a strategist. That guy, he literally lays awake at night trying to figure things out, and he usually does. Just not only from a stand location and how he plants food plots and access and weather and thermals and every single thing that he does, there's a reason for it. And he kills big deer with regularity. And there's only a handful of people in our industry that do it as regularly as he does. And that's a pretty small group, pretty elite group. But I don't know many better at it than he is. I really don't.
He killed 5 gross boons this year, just this season. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's, he's a stud. There's no doubt about it. And it's not, that there was one in Missouri, there was one in Texas, there was, the 3 in Iowa, and he killed 3 there last year in Iowa. I mean, he's not just doing it on his one piece there in Iowa. He's doing it in multiple spots. So it's amazing, really.
I always hear, and I'm sure you guys hear this too, people see that and then they complain or they'll say something like, well, that only happens because he hunts in Iowa and he's got this huge property, blah, blah, blah. It was handed to him on a silver plate.
It's a deer farm.
I always think to myself, I always think about, whether it's Mark or Terry or anybody who's having success like that, the only reason why you guys are having that kind of success is because you chose to put in a tremendous amount of work, sacrifice a lot of other things to put yourself in a position to have that. But it's not like this wasn't just like some magical thing that appeared for Mark and he has this wonderful property and he just kills big bucks because it was a gift to him. I'm sure he's put in an unbelievable amount of work. I'm sure he's sacrificed spending money on a lot of other things so that he could invest in a property and all the different things that he's working on to produce these kinds of deer, to have the time to do that. So I don't understand people who try to take something away from that. There's different ways of hunting. Some people might like to hunt public land. Some people might like to hunt private. But there's lots of challenges and lots of work that goes into both.
I think part of it, the spotlight that we're in today is much different than the one we were in 1989 and 1999, and we're much more visible than we were back then. And if they could have seen the beginnings, we're working on a project for Cabela's right now where we're going through old footage, and I mean it's comical. It's forks, it's spikes, it's the deer that everybody grew up killing. You know what I mean? It's that same caliber of deer, and it's been through time and hard work and getting their first piece of property and working their tail off to pay that off and then sell it and buy another piece of property. It doesn't happen overnight, and it hasn't. But what has happened is our visibility is much greater than it was back then when we weren't killing those kind of deer. And so the true hardcore Drury Outdoors fan has seen that progression over the years, but the fly-by-night social media person has no idea. They may have not even heard of us before, and they're just seeing maybe that Taylor's killing 180s, and Mark, every time you turn around, he seems like he's sitting behind a giant, and Terry's had a great year, and they see that kind of thing. And when you click on, their profile to see who's talking smack about you, why are they saying this? They don't know you. A lot of times it may be a young kid. They don't know where our beginnings were. A lot of times it might be somebody that, just they don't know anything about you. So you just kind of take it, you brush it off, and you keep moving on. You try not to put too much stock in it, but it's always hurtful when people are saying these things about our company, about our family, about our team members, and they really don't know the work and the effort that these guys put into it. But at the end of the day, you just keep moving on and you keep putting the work in and you keep killing the deer that these guys kill. It's not by accident.
That's all you can do. Well, do you think there's anything else we need to touch on when it comes to scouting?
I'll leave that to the master. Terry, did we cover it?
Well, I think we did. I thought we did a good job of covering this time of year, because it's so vastly different from that June, July, and August period, when you're in there sweating your tail off and you're trimming and depositing a tremendous amount of scent. I think you can be extremely effective if you fast forward and say, what's this going to look like, or try and visualize a picture of what that parcel is going to look like when the foliage is full. And if you're a visionary and you can go in there and you know what it's going to look like, and you start doing the trimming, you get your sets hung, you make sure you got plenty of straps. We put ratchet straps, make sure you got your safety line up, make sure that you're ready to climb up and hunt. You may have to make one trip in there during the summer months to enhance it a little bit, but I think you can be extremely effective. And then you go in with the attitude, you know what, if I got to move it just a little bit, 20 yards, 50 yards, and tweak it, then you do that. But more often than not, if you make a decision now, a lot of times, particularly on a rub line or scrape line, right now you can be pretty effective come October.
Great advice. One really quick thing that just popped into my mind that we haven't really touched on yet that I just think is something that everybody should at least be considering is when you're doing your scouting at this time of year, just be keeping an eye out for those types of places where you think bedding areas might be once you get into the hunting season. Because obviously knowing where deer are bedding is going to be really important to how you plan your access routes. It's going to be really important to how you choose when to hunt at certain times of the year. So thinking, okay, this looks like a spot where there's probably going to be some doe bedding, keep that in mind come the rut. If you see a perfect little knob coming off of a ridge where you can see a big old oval in it where a deer's been bedding often and maybe a couple of rubs next to it, that's probably a spot where a buck might be bedded sometimes. And just kind of mark those up on your map and remember that come the season. Those types of keys will be a part of the puzzle too. And I think that's just one thing to always keep in mind. It's not just food. It's not just trails and rubs and everything. Those beds can make a big difference. So that's the only other thing I'd add.
Great point, Mark, because the bedding areas this time of year are vastly different from the bedding areas, in August and September, when you've got those temperatures in the 100, 110 degree range versus now when they're in that 10 degree range. They're sitting on some south-facing slopes right now trying to catch that morning sun. It's not like that in August and September.
Funny you say that. I busted 2 does up last night on a south-facing slope on my way to the box blind. Yeah, and those deer didn't come out until dark. Because all the other deer from all the other spots came out early, but those deer, it totally screwed us up for getting movement on the fresh-cut corn. It didn't happen, and I solely thought it was because we bumped those 2 deer that then bumped who knows how many other deer, further into the property.
Great point. Great point. We call that a domino effect.
Yeah.
And, granted, the deer this time of year on that late season feed pattern where they may only move at 4:15 or 4:20, but you know what? When you walk in there and they're laying on those south-facing hillsides and they see you, you're either going to bump them or they're going to move after dark. And we're very, very conscious of that when we go in. We actually go in earlier now than we did during the normal time of the year because we're just wanting to try and get in there and let things settle down a bit. And trying to slip in there and maybe get into the set without bumping them out of their beds. And you can do that, but boy, it's tough this time of year because the woods are so open.
Oh, yeah. And they're loud, too.
Yes.
It just seems the sound travels so far.
Well, that was a pretty good podcast. I appreciate you joining us again, Dad. It's always fun to have you and Mark on.
Hey, no problem, guys. Mark, I hope you get Holyfield next year. I hope you find those sheds.
Thank you. Me too. I appreciate it. I'll be one happy camper if I do. So fingers are crossed. And I guess with that, Matt, let's wrap this one up. And To everyone out there listening or watching, just a couple quick reminders. If you're not already, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or wherever you go to get your audio podcasts. And then, of course, over on the Drury Outdoors YouTube channel, you can subscribe there as well. And then if you have a question, especially if it's about postseason work or shed hunting or anything like that coming up, we'd love to answer that. You can do that over at wiredtohunt.com/100%wild. And Matt, what do you got?
I'd like to add to that, we'll probably be more consistent with our podcast here now that the thick of the hunting season's over. Once we get through the trade shows here the next couple of weeks, I'd say we're going to probably be more consistent on a weekly basis and getting guests and all that type of thing now that things have kind of slowed down. So definitely get your questions submitted, and off-season pertinent questions, turkey hunting questions, all those types of things, and we'll definitely try to take care of it. As far as us, like you said, check out the video version of this podcast on our Drury Outdoors YouTube page. Also, check out the DoD TV version of what we're doing over on the Drury Outdoors YouTube page. Tons of original hunts from last fall that have never been seen before. A lot of the stuff that used to be on our DVDs, we're now doing on our YouTube page. So be sure to subscribe, check it out. Have a lot of cool things there. As always, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, on the Drury Outdoors accounts. And lastly, I'd like to mention that going into this 2017 season, for the first time in a long time, we're bringing on a couple new team members. So I'm looking for some serious videographers that have laid down some good mature buck kills on video. Submit your reel to me at comments@druryoutdoors.com, and we'd love to hear from you. So that's all I got, Mark.
That's exciting stuff. If I ever killed big deer, I'd try to send it in to you, but it doesn't happen enough.
Hey, I'm with you. I'm surprised they keep me around here. It's just I need to make sure I keep doing all the grunt work in the studio as far as the sponsors and all that, and maybe they'll let me keep coming to the farm and hunt their place, because for right now, I'm not getting it done on my lease.
Yeah, Taylor's got you beat as far as sons and daughters that are killing the big ones, Matt.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, don't laugh, Terry. Mark's got you beat on brothers killing good deer too. So by a landslide.
Right, well, thank you everyone for listening and watching. Good luck out there.
All right, peace.